Hi, everybody. Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather report for the week of December 1st through 7th. And if you missed it last week, I did do the monthly for December on the outer planets at the end of the week, and there wasn't a lot of activity, but that's already been done. And an interesting week. It's led by a full moon at 14 degrees Gemini, which is locked into the nodal axis in the square. So talk about that. Also, now Mercury has turned direct and it's going to go back to that really sweet grand water trine. Also, Mars is also a little bit active this week with the Jupiter Chiron square. So we got three things to talk about for sure, at least a couple other things. But first, just a little reminder, the Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog that I do on YouTube every week. And if you like what you see and you have a YouTube account, I'd really like you to become a follower. And when you become a follower, please don't forget to turn your notifications on, or you will not be knowing when I post the blog or be reminded anyway. So that'd be great. You can do that. And I also remember I ask everybody, since I do this as a free service, to please pass the link along to somebody else when you listen to the blog. And even if you've done that before, if you can think of someone else in your contacts list that might be interested in checking it out, please do that for me. I love getting to the blog to grow just in kind of like that word of mouth way. I really feel like find the right people that way. And also remember, if you don't have the time to do the video blog, there's an exact audio copy still available on podcasts. If you just go to your podcast app and look up Astrological Winds channel, you'll find it on several different podcasts, and that frees you up. You can listen to it on the way to work or whatever. It gives you a little bit more options for listening to it. The Astrological Winds channel also has an Instagram page. If you become a follower there, you'll see the link come up every week in your newsreel. And then you can also always find it on my website, www.astrologicalwinds.com. That's also the spot where I list all my professional services. I'd love to do your chart or somebody else's chart if you're interested in doing that, or your annual report, or whatever it may be that you're looking at, relocation, relationships. So I've been doing charts for over 20 years professionally after 7 years of training. So I'd love to do that for you. Many satisfied clients. So get into that a little bit more at the end, but always check the website out for that stuff. So, one of the things I just want to talk about quick before we go into next week is, like, remember I say, like, Mercury went direct this weekend, right? Just on Saturday, 2 days ago. So it's kind of standing still, still. And my point I made last week, and I make a lot of times, is that when Mercury goes direct, that still isn't a standstill point where a lot of the Mercury retrograde energy can really ratchet up high one last time. And if you saw what happened in in the with the airlines over this past weekend and Thanksgiving weekend, not only was there a storm, which can slow things down, but literally airlines were having to pull their jets offline to get like a new computer download. So like thousands of jets having to be pulled off for 2 hours or so, creating all kinds of delays. And then also happening to even the mail system for UPS, where they had to pull a whole bunch of new planes that they have for an indefinite time period because of like problems with the plane after an accident, after a aviation accident that they found. So like just some examples of that energy, really once again getting very concentrated when there's this time of like, oh, the planet is actually changing direction, and just because it's going direct, Mercury's case, doesn't mean we're free. Like that last period can be very, very intense, actually. So we got to see a lot of that. Now, before I get into these three main things this week, one of the things I want to just mention is on Tuesday, tomorrow, right? Venus is sextile Pluto. Now, if you'll remember, last week was all about Venus, right? It went into Sagittarius after that, getting out of the Scorpio waters. And it, had some, for many people, while the Venus and Mercury and even Mercury retrograde and the Sun were all in Scorpio most of the past month, I'm sure for many people, their relationships have been very, very tested, and probably gave us a really deep look into where all our relationships are with others, especially ones that are closer to them. And so they probably went through a lot of change, a lot of transformation during that Scorpio period. And now we're left with what's to work with from there, right? Venus went into Sagittarius. And I think what that month really is going to show us, and this sextile to Pluto is going to play into that, is now we have a much better idea of who's a real friend, who we prefer to really spend our time with, right? And this one can really deepen certain relationships, and that includes romantic sexual ones for sure, or even relationships to groups, okay? So like, so we can really clearly see how our emotions and the others emotions, or even the group's emotions, really affect each other now. That's what that Venus Pluto at the end of all that Venus energy, that's what this Venus Pluto is showing us early this week. And so we feel emotions very deeply about these situations now, and you basically know who you want, who you want to be with and what you want to do. And this, and that can be really positive because it can really start relationships on, that you feel that are worthy on a much, deeper, more profound level. So so it can mark the beginnings even of new deep relationships, but it also just really has given us a chance to look that over, and then this sextile would just help us make those final assessments, is my point. So Thursday is the big day this week. This is the full moon in Gemini, 14 degrees about. That's where you want to look in your chart. 14 degrees Gemini, 14 degrees Sagittarius, because as always, a full moon is an opposition between the sun and moon. And so they're on the same axis, that means. And the axis of Gemini and Sag is the axis of information, the axis of knowledge, the axis of communication. And what is the Gemini full moon? What does that moon in Gemini want? It wants a flow of information nonstop. That that's what makes the moon, which is our emotions in Gemini, feel good. Is this like constant feeding of information? It's like multitasking with information, constantly taking it in from all kinds of different sources, too. It can be coming from people with communications, it can be coming from computers with what we're reading, it can be coming from what we're hearing, through TV or anything else, podcasts or anything that we listen to. I mean, and we have this very, very curious mind that just it's like a mind that's like, like it's like eating knowledge, it's like constantly eating knowledge. But the thing is with Gemini, it's very much on the surface. It's very much a superficial kind of energy, right? It's like just like the collecting part mainly. It's like, going out there and, with your basket and like collecting different things and putting it in the mind's basket, but really not dwelling very deeply on much of that stuff at this point. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, and this is where the communication part really comes in too, is when we're getting this information, we want to talk about it to other people. And a lot of that is really just our own processing, right? inside ourselves on new information that we're getting, but we're just bouncing it off of other people so that we can actually hear ourselves. It's part of our own processing or filtering of that. And once again, it makes us feel good. That's part of the thing of that moon in Gemini. It's also like not only am I this information collector, but I'm also a distributor of those thoughts and ideas and opinions and information. So therefore it makes it a very social, positive, extroverted full moon. It wants to go out, it wants to connect with other people. And it's also a time, like other things that, it may do and is a good time to do is like because we are interested in learning more, it is a good time, to take classes, just collect, that's, we have a very open mind about learning more and we're willing to adjust things that we value. Now, one of the things that, so then where's the opposition coming to the sun in Sagittarius? Because, the sun in Sagittarius is also about collecting knowledge, right? But it's a different way. Like Gemini is collecting stuff that's already out there. Sagittarius is almost like wanting to create almost new knowledge. It's secondary knowledge. It's wanting to take knowledge to a much, much deeper level than Gemini wants to. It's not just about collecting it and putting it in the basket. It's about like really taking this knowledge, integrating it very deeply within ourselves and allowing it to like change our values, change our philosophies, even change the way we, look at religion or law or social things. It just, it wants to really deep. So they both have a lot in common, these signs, and in the vision that they're looking to learn more. And one of the things that's interesting about both of them too, and we may see an uptick in this, especially Mercury, the ruler of Gemini moon, is still, in the shadow of the Mercury retrograde period. And not only that, it's going to go into Sagittarius again, a sign of its detriment. Both of these signs, with their zest for collecting knowledge in the different ways that they do it, they're both can be very undisciplined and sloppy with the details of doing so and overlook and things. So like there can be a lot of like mistakes that can be made, and so that's part of like, the thing of just testing that energy out, now interestingly enough, this full moon makes no other aspects to any physical planets, but it is in an exact grand cross, basically, or at the bendings of the nodes. That is, both the moon and the sun are square the north node and the south node exactly. Also at 14 degrees of Pisces, the north node, 14 degrees of Virgo, the south node. And I've talked about the effects of those two signs on the nodes in prior blogs over the last 9 or 10 months. But, very, very interesting because, this, even though it's not making any aspects to planets, this can, really bring some tension into this energy. And it's a lot of it comes from people kind of being insensitive to one another and therefore not willing to adapt to one another. And what that leads to is separations. Now, many times on this level, it'll be separations of communication. You kind of just shut down communication, but you could even see physical separations. And because the nodal axis is involved, once again, this brings in groups. This could very much be like group settings, realizing that, that you have some fallout with this group and that, you can't no longer be with them. And look at the example going on in the world right now, too, within the Republican Party led by Marjorie Taylor Greene, where she's like, I'm stepping down. And then there's like 40 or 50 other Republicans who are talking about like they're not going to run again. And then a senator from Indiana who's not willing to redistrict his state, all because even though they're in the same group, they're having a lot of disagreement with individuals within that group. So this is really a perfect example of what this full moon energy can do with the individual versus the group when you realize that the values you thought you had connected on are no longer coinciding anymore. There, and you actually feel a need to separate. But like on a personal level, the square to the nodal axis can show there's a lot of disharmony in your life going on with either people you live with or people that you work with too, which, and once again, those are groups. So you may decide there's certain associations that are just not worth it anymore. So that it can make this full moon very intense on certain levels. And there's two other challenging things about it also. Number one of which I already said before, Mercury is the ruler of this full moon. And on Thursday, the same day of the full moon, it is exactly quincunx Chiron for the third time in that, in the Mercury retrograde cycle. And what is that saying? It's saying that we need to look at our own attitudes and how we think about things and how they affect our relationships with others or groups. And that's not to say whether they're right or wrong. They may be right, they may be wrong, but they need to make some kind of adjustment in these situations. And that can be separation. Once again, that can be going back and realizing, that's what this is. But like, if you can do that, if you can, adjust those attitudes and beliefs and opinions, then you can play into the grand trine for the third time with Mercury on the weekend. And the other thing that's really difficult about this full moon, so that's two things. The third thing is actually the next aspect the moon is going to be making, even though it's not anywhere near exact yet. On Friday morning, the next day, it's going to be opposite Mars. And so like that shows that where this full moon is leading many people is feeling very stormy inside, especially about relationships. That people can feel very defensive right now, very triggered emotionally and reacting defensively about that, and can be in conflict, especially with people they're close to emotionally or in some kind of partnership even. So that shows like this is like the energy sometimes of, maybe it is best to work alone and separate from the people that are holding you back or the groups that are holding you back. And this one shows too, it might be something good to do something physical. You got that Sag energy, both those signs are jumpy. Now you got the moon opposite Mars as the next aspect. You just have to be careful once again about being impulsive, which all three of those energies do too. Mars, Sagittarius, and Gemini can all be impulsive. So like if we're not being disciplined enough, we can set up ourselves for some kind of accident. But like I said, look at those houses that 13 and 14 Gemini are in, and any planets that are in the 13, 14, or 15-degree range in your chart will also be aspecting that full moon and affect the way that you personally feel it, right? So then on Friday, basically Friday through Sunday, because Mars moves a little slower, Mars is going to get involved with the Jupiter Chiron square, which is one of the two things that are the big things of the month that I talked about in the monthly at the end of last week's blog. So if you missed that, you might want to go back out there and check that out. But anyway, Mars is going to trine Chiron on Friday and then quincunx Jupiter on Sunday, and kind of working together for sure. But the Mars trine Chiron is really great, actually. That is really excellent energy for finding creative solutions to things that have been stuck. innovative improvements to things that need to move forward. And that's usually based on talents that we have or that we become recently aware of that we can tap into. And so you can be a leader, you can be a teacher by your own actions with this. You can make a lead by example, and that gives a really positive impression to others. And this also gives us an eagerness too to learn more about things that are helpful to us because, that's always kind of healing too, isn't it? So it's definitely a good time to activate and tap into your talents and this energy in a harmonious way, and find some new ways to deal with situations that maybe need some creative energy brought into it, need some innovation brought into it. And then the Mars quincunx Jupiter shows that there is going to be an amazing amount of energy to tap into to do this. It's very available, but the biggest issue with that is just trying to discipline that energy and to make it useful. Otherwise, it can be really, really hard to control that energy. It can really get our actions off, like awkward, like, wow, like, how did that happen? So if you're too impulsive, you can definitely, once again, set yourself up for kinds of accidents. It can be really, really hard to sit still with Mars Jupiter energy like this. You really need to do something. So it's a good time to do something, do something active, but be careful about how quick and undisciplined you can be, or you can set yourself up for something that can be, you're like, ow, why did I do that? So, but this definitely gives a lot of desire for freedom too. And you mix it with Sag energy too. Wanting to like have your freedom, giving that to others and what you're doing, but also asking you to be responsible with that freedom, not to be so awkward and weird with it or something. And then Saturday and Sunday, also the third and final time that Mercury's still in Scorpio, still in its shadow of the retrograde period, gets in a grand water trine with Jupiter and Saturn. And as I said the first two times, you do not want to not use this energy. I hope you guys have been using it because there is just like this great balance between expansion and growth, taking more in with Jupiter, and being able to distill that, crystallize that into some kind of form, work on the details, be disciplined with it with Saturn. So this can, like, you can take your greater vision and turn it into something practical now, turn it into something useful now. And this, with the mind, it's with the intellect, is where you really want to work a lot of this with Mercury, as being the planet that's triggering it. So the mind can be very, very sharp about having this great plan for the future and knowing exactly what it needs to do to get that thing going, and do the organizing, do the planning, any kind of thing like that. And then also, when you think about it too, it's like, you know that energy to me is something that's very, very useful for using in your business, in your career. And thing is too, it's a water trine too, so not only the mind, but like, listen to what your intuition is saying, because that connects to the higher mind. And with Mars, I mean, Mercury in Pisces, I mean, in Scorpio, and all this other water energy, Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer, are very receptive and to intuitive messaging that can get into the intellect and have us have breakthroughs, like get us really inspired. So like I said, really good. If you can focus this energy to your career or business, it can really get ahead. You can really see that, but also good for any kind of studying, once again, which also works well with that full moon energy. Instead of allowing the full moon energy to agitate you, use it to study, learn more, use it to, this can help the mind stay focused on the details of some of that stuff that Sagittarius and Gemini and Jupiter can have a trouble doing. Help it concentrate, help it organize, help it get things done, turn abstract ideas into concrete results. And it also shows that we can be a really good communicator too. And the communication is going to be about serious things, practical things, but at the same time, still very positive energy behind it, not like overly stoic or something. So I do really like that energy and the way that ends. And I think this Mars energy can be worked with too, as long as we give ourselves something to do and stay disciplined. The full moon can definitely be a challenge with this in relationships and in relationships to groups. And we really may just end up saying, hey, yeah, this is not worth my time. Our beliefs are just not congruent enough, and I need to move forward and be more focused on the persons or groups that I'm more congruent with. And like I said, you can really see that playing out in society politically right now. All right, well, that's what I got for this week. Let me see what's going on next week just real quick. If we've got what's going on, well, Neptune is going to go direct next week, which I talked about in the monthly last week, and then Mercury will go back into Sag, which remember is its sign of detriment. That's where it started the cycle for the retrograde the last time. And it looks like we are going to have, yeah, there is some serious Mars energy going on towards the end of next week. It's actually going to go into Capricorn. And that's a place where Mars likes to be. It's exalted there, but it can be very strong armed there too. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to talk about. And of course, since it's going into a new sign, it's going to hit all those outer planets that are at the end or beginning of their sign. So we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about next week too. All right, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds Channel. You're going to pass the link along to somebody else for me right now, as a little payback for this. If you'd like to give a currency donation, no amount is too small. Seriously, even a few bucks. My Venmo is at, the symbol at Matthew with two T's, hyphen in the middle, Lawton, Lauten, or my Cash App, $Matthew Lawton, no hyphen in this one, just capital Lauten. Should go, the best way you guys can really support me is I know if you're watching this, you have an interest in astrology. I would love to do your chart or somebody that that's looking for chart work. I do all kinds of different chart work. If you check the website out, www.astrologicalwinds.com, you'll see the different services I have, the price listing there. If you can put half of it up and make the rest of the payment within a month or two, if you're financially strapped, I can do that and work with you. I really recommend that every year around your birthday that you get a predictive reading for the next year. And if you haven't had your natal chart done, your birth chart done by a professional, I'm not talking like a printout from a computer or something online or some app, like, someone who really has been doing it a long time, like myself or somebody else who does it professionally. It's going to be a different experience, and you really need to realize you have that chart with you your whole life. If you have this interest in astrology, you need to get that. But all kinds of other stuff too. If you're looking to relocate, relationship issues, if your election, trying to find the right time to do something, fixed star readings, if you're looking for your deeper soul purpose and you really know your chart well. And then also, if you're looking for weekly or monthly services too, if you're a professional and you need that kind of weekly and monthly consulting, that I do that too, so check me out at the website, email me here if you need to. It doesn't hurt to talk to me about any of this stuff. If you're a group and you're looking for a class or a lecture or workshop, some kind of mini reading, it can even be done on Zoom. We can work on something like that. If you are a student, I do have some beginning classes available on podcasts you can buy individually. I did have someone recently say they might be interested in being a student, so that might be like maybe just one more person, and beginning classes could be done as on a live format on a regular basis too. But I'm only willing to do that if I have a certain amount of students that are doing that actively with me. So, but anyway, any of that stuff, check the website out. Um, my email directly is mattthue823@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support. I will see you all next week, and we will talk about all that Mars stuff going on for sure. And until then, let's work with this energy that we have this week. Some intense stuff for sure, but it gives us a good place of knowing where we're at and where we can go from there. All right, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel signing off.